I've been a truck driver for nearly 20 years. This incident happened to me in 2023. I was making an overnight delivery through the Black Rock Desert in Nevada, heading towards a destination in Oregon. I think I was delivering household appliances, I don't really remember. It was pitch black in every direction. My semi-truck's headlights were very dim then, and I had been putting off fixing them for a long time. Normally I couldn't tell the difference, but since there were almost no other cars on the road, the difference was much more obvious. I remember having to squint every few minutes to see the road in the distance. That alone could have been a horror story. I was considering stopping for a few hours and waiting for the sunrise, but I didn't want to waste time. I really needed the money then, so I kept driving even though it wasn't entirely safe. I thought, since the road was straight, it should be fine. I guess it was about an hour before sunrise when I saw something approaching fast in the distance. Fearing I would hit an animal, I slammed on the brakes as my truck screeched to a halt. I realized what was in front of me, a car with its hazard lights on. The strange thing was, the car was right in the middle of the road, completely on the double yellow line. Even stranger, the passenger door was wide open. My truck stopped about a foot before hitting it. Without wanting to boast, I'm a pretty brave guy and know how to handle myself in a bar fight, so I wasn't really scared when I saw the car. I was more curious than anything. I figured maybe someone needed a jump start or something, so I backed up my semi-truck and pulled over. I thought about setting out some flares, but decided against it since I hadn't seen a single car besides this one. I got out of my truck and walked towards the car. It was a warm, still night. I remember how strange it was that there was almost no wind. It was also incredibly quiet that night. The quiet click of the hazard lights was the only sound in what felt like the entire desert. I approached the car a little. I remember distinctly it was a new-looking red Ford Fusion. I cautiously approached the car. As I said, the passenger door was wide open. I walked around the car and stopped dead in my tracks. The car was completely empty. I made sure of it, checking the back seat and anywhere else someone might be lying down. There was absolutely no one inside. Suddenly, I was a lot less sure about the situation. I had expected someone needing help, maybe even someone asleep in a really dumb place. I certainly didn't expect this. The car was completely empty. I glanced back a few times, feeling a lot more uneasy now. I kept looking over my shoulder, looking in every direction. I felt like someone was going to jump me or something. The problem was, it was so dark that I couldn't see far ahead, except for what my truck's headlights illuminated. It was creepy. I waited a while longer, thinking about getting back in my truck and forgetting the whole thing. Someone was out there, somewhere. Against my better judgment, I decided to keep investigating. I looked inside the car, but everything seemed completely normal. The keys were even still in the ignition, though the engine was off. I went back to the car and walked to the trunk. All right, let's see, I thought. I tried to open it, but I couldn't. It was locked. I took the keys from the ignition and tried to open the trunk. Still, the thing wouldn't budge. It was somehow jammed from the inside. I opened the back door and tried to access the trunk through the back seat. To my surprise, it was completely open. There were 3 densely packed trash bags in there, along with a rope tying the trunk shut. I remember glancing back one more time before reaching in. The situation was safe. I must have been within 5 inches of one of the bags when the loudest gunshot I'd ever heard exploded into the night. I slammed my head against the car's roof in surprise. I didn't even think. I threw the keys onto the front seat and got out of the car as fast as I could. As I climbed into my semi-truck, I heard a hoarse voice yelling in the distance. He yelled, "Hey," a few times, and his voice sounded like it was approaching fast. I scrambled into my semi-truck and started it. I threw it into gear as fast as I could. I remember swearing countless times as the engine initially stalled, and that's when I saw him. As my truck started to pull away, I saw someone standing at the trunk of the car. It was a short, stocky man with red hair. He was wearing overalls and ankle-high boots. In his left hand, he held a small shovel, but in his right was an old hunting rifle. We looked at each other for a few seconds as my truck started to pass him. He didn't move. I remember he didn't look crazy or anything. He had a worried expression on his face. As I passed him, he dropped his shovel and started waving his arms. He yelled, "Wait," a few times, but I wasn't staying another second. As I drove off, I watched in the rearview mirror as he ran after my truck for a few seconds before running back to his car. Clearly he wanted me to stop, but there was absolutely no way I was going to do that. I floored it, pushing my semi-truck far faster than I should have. I drove for about 5 minutes and started thinking I was safe, but then I saw headlights approaching fast behind me. I remember feeling more scared than I had ever felt in my entire life. I called the police and told them what happened as best I could. That's when the car was truly right on my tail. It started honking its horn like crazy at me. I honestly didn't know what to do, so I just kept driving, praying to God that he wouldn't try to ram me. After about 15 minutes of this, he cut in front of me and slammed on his brakes, forcing me to slow down. I nearly hit him when finally some police lights flashed ahead. The Ford swerved to the right and sped off into the desert, disappearing from view. I pulled over and waited for the officers to arrive. I frantically told them what happened, but the useless police decided to take a report from me rather than chase the guy. I was so angry about that. I told the guy about 2 times that he could probably catch him if he left now. The police told me not to worry and that they would do a thorough search as soon as backup arrived. He let me go and said they would call me if they had any updates for me. They never did. None of my friends have a story this crazy, and I've told it more times than I can count. I know what you're probably thinking. The guy must have been burying a body. That doesn't explain why he had such a small shovel or why he tried to follow me. The bags in his trunk were also too small for that, although some of my friends think he might have been dismembering a body. For my own sanity, I like to think that he was burying some other type of animal, maybe putting a sick dog out of its misery or a dangerous snake. I really don't know. Whatever the case, I've never truly been comfortable driving through the desert at night after this experience. I'm sure you've seen some of the more modern videos online where truck drivers document their daily routines and give each other tips, or maybe you haven't. But because I, Bhima, am still young in this industry, every time I open TikTok or YouTube Shorts, that's all I see. I won't go into it, but I had to drop out of a pretty prestigious university for some personal reasons, and people always told me I could be more than just a truck driver. Honestly, it's not a bad job. I've been doing deliveries for over 4 years. Obviously, the only grueling part of the job is the long hours. You can never truly gauge how isolation will affect you without experiencing it firsthand. My only advice is to make peace with any demons that might be lurking in your subconscious, because they'll surely gnaw at your brain in the lonely hours. That's what happened to me. Anyway, this happened to me 3 months after I was hired by my first company, in the spring of 2019. I was basically as new to the trade as anything could be. I was driving from Dallas, Texas to Chicago, Illinois, an 11-hour trip. Driving 11 hours might not seem too crazy, but consider the fact that I had just finished an 8-hour drive, and that should give it some perspective. I wanted to get the delivery done as quickly as possible, so I opted to drive through the night. I was going to arrive in Chicago just before 5 a.m. Everything was going smoothly. There were barely any other cars on the road, so I was able to push my semi-truck a little faster than usual. About halfway through the trip, around 3 a.m., I remembered reaching for the center console to chug a Red Bull, but there was nothing there. Of course, I had forgotten to restock my truck after finishing my previous delivery. After hitting my dashboard a few times, I groaned in frustration, knowing that I would have to stop somewhere. There's nothing I hate more than having to make a stop during my trip. I might be unique in this, but I always get more tired when my vehicle isn't moving, even if I'm only stopped for 30 seconds. After looking at the navigation, I realized I had no choice. Either fall asleep on the road or stop and get an energy drink. Those options were basically equivalent. Reluctantly, I pulled into the first service stop I saw. I honestly had no idea where I was, probably somewhere in Missouri at this point. Too late, I realized that this wasn't actually a service stop. It looked like an abandoned gas station and a repurposed convenience store. I'm not sure if there's a better way to describe it. Whatever it was, it looked like there was another quick stop not far ahead, so I figured I'd go there. Regardless, I parked my semi-truck and walked into the first convenience store. To be honest, I was expecting one of 2 things to happen. Either the place would be open, or the doors would be locked. You can imagine my surprise when the door swung open into a pitch-black store. I looked around, hoping maybe I was lucky and there was a stray drink or snack. Just before I turned around, my eyes adjusted to the darkness and I caught a faint light emanating from the corner of the room. I walked towards it, and the light turned out to be coming from some kind of back room. Curiosity got the better of me, and I slowly opened the door. To my surprise, there was a refrigerator plugged into the wall. Eagerly, I opened the door, but found nothing. Absolutely nothing. The shelves had been removed, like the entire appliance had been gutted. As I closed the door, I was 90% sure I heard a rattling sound from the main room, like something had fallen to the floor. I froze for a full 10 seconds. Was I imagining it? No way. Calmly, I walked back into the main room and looked around. Nothing. Part of me wanted to keep investigating, but I didn't have time for this. I walked out of the entrance and basically ran to the other store. That store was open, thankfully. I paid for my drink and got back to my truck. Something about this whole stop felt wrong. I needed to get back on the road as soon as possible. I took one last glance at the abandoned store and saw that its door was now open. I was 100% sure I had closed it behind me. Still, it wasn't my job to figure out what was going on here. So, I started the engine and rejoined my semi-truck on the highway. The caffeine started to kick in and snapped me out of my fatigued haze pretty quickly. My mind started to wander, and I began to think about how strange the whole thing actually was. I guess a homeless person or an abandoned building isn't the strangest thing in the world, but my brain couldn't explain that refrigerator. Whatever theories I thought of, I tried to dismiss them and keep driving. That's when I started to notice strange movements in the curtains behind me. Sweat started to bead on my forehead. I looked in the rearview mirror as the curtains seemed to bulge and move even though I didn't have the AC on. I thought the worst. There was someone in my truck. I didn't have a weapon or anything, so I quietly punched the number for the nearest police station into my phone. The drive there was the most tense and horrifying 30 minutes of my life. I kept imagining the person reaching for me or trying to crash my truck. Finally, I approached the police station in Jefferson City, Missouri. I stopped my semi-truck as close as I could and basically ran into the police station. Within seconds, my truck was surrounded by police, and after I opened the back, what I saw will stay with me for life. The police pulled out 3 individuals who appeared to be homeless, 2 men and 1 woman. They were dressed in ragged clothes and wrapped in what looked like dirty blankets. One of the men was armed with 2 folding knives. All 3 refused to speak, but stared at me menacingly as they were handcuffed. I don't know what they wanted. I guess I'll never know. My name is Aiden. I've been a truck driver for various companies for almost 10 years. Things are pretty routine by now. Pick up goods and materials, verify their accuracy, and deliver them as instructed. We don't get paid by the hour, so efficiency is paramount in this line of work. For someone like me who's been doing this forever, I like to think I can outwork all the young guys getting into this. This isn't always good, though. Usually I push myself to the absolute limit in terms of functioning on little sleep. 7 years ago, I was working for a warehouse based out of Nebraska. For anyone who doesn't know, Nebraska is one of the flatter states, which makes trucking easier. It also means that missing a few hours of sleep can be the difference between a job and being fired. It was a cold Wednesday morning in July. The start of the week meant more loads needed to be delivered, which meant more work for me. I wanted to get everything done in one fell swoop, so I tracked my route to Wyoming accordingly, planning not to stop at all for sleep. I set out a few hours after lunch, hoping to arrive at my destination very early the next morning. I pushed my semi-truck as hard as I could, probably a little over the speed limit. It was late, and I remember rubbing the crust from my eyelids as the clock passed 2:30 a.m. I was struggling to keep my eyes open, but I only had about an hour left on this trip, so I gritted my teeth and kept going. My friend Liam, who is also a truck driver, introduced me to smelling salts when I first started. If you don't know, smelling salts are basically a type of crystal in a small bottle. One sniff and you're awake. You have to be careful, though. Too much consecutive use can be dangerous, or at least that's what Liam told me. The salts burn your nose a little, but anytime I needed a boost, I'd reach for the smelling salts first. This was one of those times. I took a deep sniff and jerked my head back, reflexes taking over. I felt the adrenaline rush through my body, and I hoped the feeling would last for the rest of the drive. Half an hour passed, and I was really struggling. I felt myself starting to nod off, and the rumble of my truck drifting onto the shoulder would wake me up. This was getting dangerous. I had to pull over. I was alone on the highway, but there was nowhere to pull over. There was only forest on either side of me. I slowed the truck down, looking for a place to pull over. At this slow speed, my headlights cut through the darkness, and I could see more. As I looked around, I saw something that confused me. There was a purple dress lying in the middle of the road. What the hell is that? I thought, rubbing my eyes. Was I hallucinating? I blinked 6 times just to make sure I wasn't going crazy. It was real. I approached the dress with my truck and stared at it as I drove past. Looking back, this should have been a bigger red flag, but I guess I was too tired to process what was going on. About 200 yards later, I passed a pair of shoes. Now I was starting to panic. What the hell was going on? I drove past the shoes, praying to God there would be a place to pull over soon. My father, Samuel, was a very religious man, so I clutched his old crucifix and hoped he would help me. A little further down the road, I saw more random clothing, some of which looked like children's clothing. This time I stopped the truck. Panic was starting to creep in. Something was very, very wrong. I sat in the driver's seat with the truck in neutral. I expected something to happen, but it never did, so I did what my instincts told me. I got out of the truck and went to check on the clothes. I still remember the feeling of the cold morning air cutting through my skin, which definitely helped my fatigue. I approached the pile cautiously. It was indeed children's clothing. It looked like there were both boys' and girls' clothes in the pile. I looked into the woods, but I couldn't see much of anything in the darkness. I was on high alert, worried this was some kind of trap. I decided it wasn't my business to find out what was going on, so I headed back to my truck. Just then, I heard a crunch from my left. I turned my head, trying to see what was there. I stood there, waiting to hear another sound. After about 30 seconds, there was another crunch, but this time from the opposite side of the road. My survival instincts kicked in, and I bolted towards the truck. I jumped into the front seat, but right before I closed the door, I heard children screaming. I froze. My heart was pounding. I was stuck at a crossroads. I wasn't going to fight random people in the pitch-black woods, but I couldn't just leave helpless children. Before I could make a decision, nearly identical children's screams rang out again. Without thinking, I started the truck and pointed its nose into the woods where I heard the sound. My headlights illuminated about 30 yards into the woods. There were 3 or 4 people, one of them holding a large speaker. They were hiding behind some trees as my truck illuminated them, but I exposed them long enough to see what they were doing. They scurried out of the light before I could really make out any features, but I swear on my father, Samuel's, grave, they were holding speakers, trying to lure me into the woods with fake children's screams. I was just shocked. I just sat there staring at the trees they had just been hiding behind. I reached for my phone to call the police, but before I finished dialing, I heard a thump from the back of the truck. Someone threw something from the other direction. I was done. I turned back towards the road and hit the gas, speeding away. I could see someone on the other side of the road. He yelled something I didn't understand before throwing something at the truck that shattered my passenger window. I drove the last hour in silence. I was too scared to process what had just happened, but there was no way I was stopping for sleep in those woods. I finished my delivery and then passed out. I must have slept for 10 straight hours. When I woke up, the first thing I did was call the police, who told me they would investigate those woods and give me any updates. Then I thought about the whole thing and how stupid I was to get out of my truck. I shouldn't have interfered, but the idea of kidnapped kids or worse was too much for me to ignore. To this day, I still don't know what those people were trying to do. I don't know why they didn't attack me when they had the chance or what they would have done to me if I had run into the woods after the children's screams. In all my years of trucking, nothing has come close to an experience as weird or truly terrifying as this.